Today, we're looking at 3 tough parenting questions. These are excerpted from the book, The New Dare to Discipline by Dr. James Dobson. You know, parenting is a rough occupation. It's a rough role to play. And there are always questions, there are always tensions we have to walk. And there's so much wisdom that we're all looking for all the time. Hopefully, looking at the answer to these 3 questions can help make things a little bit easier. So question number 1 is, what is the most effective way to manage misbehaving children? And we talked a little bit about this when we talked about the parenting pyramid. And we said there are proactive parents and there are reactive parents. And the best place to start with discipline is with relationship building with the kids. And so Dr. Dobson's answer here is the best way to spend time with them, the best way is to spend time with them before disciplinary problems occur, having fun together and enjoying mutual laughter and joy. When moments of love and closeness happen on a regular basis, kids are not as tempted to challenge and test the limits. Now, he didn't say they never do. He said they're not as tempted to. Many confrontations can be avoided by building relationships with kids and thereby making them want to cooperate at home. It beats anger as a motivator of little ones. Question number 2, how do I find the right balance between being too strict and too permissive? You know, in our culture, we are a pendulum swing of extremes from one to another. Politically, sexually, morally, religiously, there are so many examples of moving from one extreme to another. And that's true in parenting as well. The pendulum has swung back and forth regularly between harsh, oppressive control and the unstructured permissiveness we saw in the mid-20th century. It's time we realize that both extremes leave scars on the lives of young victims. At the oppressive end of the continuum, a child suffers the humiliation of total domination and lives in constant fear. He or she is unable to make their own decisions, and their personality is squelched beneath the hobnail boot of parental authority. Deep, abiding anger and even psychosis can emerge from this persistent dominance. Of greater concern are the boys and girls who are being subjected to physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. It's hard to believe just how cruel parents can be to defenseless, wide-eyed children. And then there's the entire range of humiliating behavior by a mom or dad, making a youngster feel stupid, weird, or unloved. Parents who are cold and stern with their sons and daughters often leave them damaged for life. Dr. Dobson recommends the judicious use of corporal punishment under specific circumstances and limits, but does not believe in parental harshness. My own personal opinion is that theoretically, there's a place for corporal punishment. And practically in my own parenting, it was used more frequently with the first children than with the latter children. For various reasons, but I've really come to be convinced that in our culture, in our society today, there's already too much violence, too much harshness, too much anger, too much bullying, and too much lack of control. And so while theoretically there may be a place for corporal punishment in some circumstances with some limitations, I believe it needs to be the very last option, that we need to look for other options first and second and third and fourth. And maybe in some circumstances coming to corporal punishment at the very end as a last result. Dr. Dobson goes on to say, children are incredibly vulnerable to rejection, ridicule, criticism, and anger at home, and they deserve to grow up in an environment of safety, acceptance, and warmth. The opposite extreme is also damaging to children. In the absence of adult leadership, the child is their own master from their earliest babyhood, and they think the world revolves around their heady empire, and often they have utter contempt and disrespect for those closest to them, those in authority. Anarchy and chaos usually reign in their home. When the child is young, their mother's embarrassed to take her little Spitfire anywhere. It would be worth the hardship she endures if this condition produced healthy, secure children, but it clearly does not. I've been shocked in recent weeks just to see children in public kicking or hitting their mothers. It's hard to believe that there are still homes that allow their children to do such things. Dr. Dobson says that if it's desirable for children to be kind, appreciative, and pleasant, those qualities should be taught, not hoped for. If we want to see honesty, truthfulness, and unselfishness in our offspring, then these characteristics should be the conscious objectives of our early instructional process. In other words, we need to teach these things while they're young. If it's important to produce respectful, responsible young citizens, then we should set out to mold them accordingly. Heredity does not equip the child with proper attitudes. Children learn what they are taught. So if both extremes are harmful, how do we find the safety of the middle ground? I agree with Dr. Dobson when he says the best source of guidance for parents can be found in the wisdom of the Judeo-Christian ethic, which originated with our Creator and was handed down generation by generation from the time of Christ. And I'll add to that. That's certainly the most authoritative resource. But there are many, many good books, good videos, good webinars, good seminars, good, helpful, practical, easy to absorb and assimilate principles for healthy parenting written by godly Christian parenting experts. So that leads us to question number 3. What is the proper relationship between love and discipline? And I have a little problem with the way the question's asked because it almost implies that they're two separate things. And I think one of the reasons it's worded that way is because in our culture, we have synonymized the word discipline with the word punishment, as if they mean the same thing, when in fact they do not. And we've referenced this in previous videos, but it bears repeating here that punishment is about making somebody pay for the wrong they did. Discipline is about helping somebody to learn to do what's right. And learning or helping somebody learn to do what's right is always a loving thing. It's not a separate thing. It's not an opposite thing. It's not a different thing. It's part of love, especially if you're a parent. Well, as Dr. Dobson says, we've already looked at the first factor, disciplinary control, and what the extremes of oppression and permissiveness do to a child. The other ingredient, he says, parental love, is equally vital. In homes where children are not adored by at least one parent or parent figure, they wither like a plant without water. It's been known for decades that an infant who is not loved, touched, and cuddled will often die before their first birthday. Evidence of this emotional need was observed in the 13th century when Frederick II conducted an experiment with 50 infants. He wanted to see what language they would speak if they never had the opportunity to hear the spoken word. He assigned foster mothers to bathe and suckle the children, but forbade them to cuddle or talk to their charges. The experiment failed dramatically because all 50 infants died. More recent studies indicate that the mother-child relationship during the first year of life is apparently vital to the infant's survival. An unloved child is truly the saddest phenomenon in all of nature.